You send a message reminding your co-parent about the pickup time you both confirmed 3 weeks ago. They respond and say, "That was never agreed to." You find the text thread. The conversation's right there, and they still tell you it didn't happen that way. That moment is not a memory error. It is a communication pattern, one that pulls you into the past and keeps you from managing what is actually in front of you. What that pattern is, why it works, and how to respond to it without losing your footing. That is what this video is about. The instinct most parents have in that moment is to correct the record. Send the screenshot. Write the timeline. Explain exactly what was agreed and when. And it feels reasonable. It feels necessary, because the facts are right there. But here's what that response actually does. It accepts the invitation to debate the past, and once you are in that debate, the current situation stops getting managed. You are no longer coordinating around your child's schedule. You are defending your version of a conversation that already happened. The revision is not the problem you need to solve. The problem you need to solve is still the original one: what needs to happen, and when, and for whom. Staying anchored to that is the first and most important shift. There is a process called narrative control, and it operates differently from straightforward dishonesty. When a co-parent consistently revises a shared history, they are not typically making a simple memory error. They are engaged in a pattern where reframing past events creates a more favorable position in the present. Psychologists describe this as reconstructive memory under conflict. The emotional stakes of a situation actively shape how a person presents past events, sometimes without full awareness that it is happening. Here is why that matters for your communication strategy. You cannot resolve reconstructive memory through evidence. Presenting evidence, sending screenshots, providing timelines increases emotional activation in the conversation, and increased emotional activation makes the revision more likely to continue, not less. The more you push to establish what really happened, the more the other person's nervous system interprets that as a threat to their position and doubles down. This is not purely a character flaw. It is a predictable neurological pattern. In co-parenting, this pattern tends to target 3 specific areas: informally made agreements, because they are harder to verify; emotional tone in past conversations, because tone is subjective; and the reasoning behind past decisions, because intent is almost impossible to prove. These 3 areas are targeted precisely because they produce the most doubt and create the most friction in the current conversation. Here is the part most people misunderstand. The goal of this pattern is rarely to win a single argument. The goal is to establish a broader dynamic where your perception of what happened becomes negotiable. If that dynamic takes hold, it compounds. Every future disagreement has to be relitigated from the beginning. Your energy goes into defending your memory rather than managing your child's needs. And the parent who stays focused on logistics and outcomes holds a consistent advantage over the one who is still trying to prove what was said 3 months ago. That is the cost, and it is why your response strategy matters more than most parents initially realize. Consider this situation. Both parents agreed over text that school pickup would shift to Thursdays starting a specific week. 3 weeks later, the other parent says that was never decided. You send the thread. They say the message was taken out of context, or that it was conditional on something that never happened. You explain the context, they reframe the context. And now, the entire conversation has moved away from the actual logistics need, which is whether a child is being picked up on Thursday. The structured response in that moment is not to defend the agreement. It is to restate the need. Pickup is scheduled for Thursday. Please confirm you'll be there, or let me know by Tuesday if that changes. That message does not engage the revision. It stays in the present. It creates documentation without creating a debate, and it focuses the conversation on a decision that still needs to be made. Here is a second example. During a discussion about a medical appointment, your co-parent says you never informed them. You remember the conversation clearly, possibly a voicemail, possibly an email. If your response is focused on proving that you did inform them, the conversation shifts away from the appointment and toward your reliability as a communicator. The more useful response centers the child. The appointment is confirmed for date, at time. I'll send the details now so you have them. You document, you move forward, and you do not give the revision a platform to operate from. There is one type of response that consistently makes this pattern worse, and it is the one that feels most natural in the moment. Asking why they are doing this. Questions about motivation invite emotional escalation. They open a space where the answer is almost never productive and is often personal. Keeping the response action-focused and child-focused removes that opening entirely. A third pattern appears over longer timelines. A co-parent may revise the history of why an ongoing arrangement was made. That was always temporary. Or, we only agreed to that because of the situation at the time. These statements are designed to destabilize agreements that are currently working. The response here is not to argue the original reasoning. It is to anchor the current arrangement in what it is producing. The current schedule has been consistent, and the kids are doing well with it. I'd like to keep that stability in place. That response does not argue the past. It positions the present as worth protecting on its own terms. There are 4 communication shifts that make a measurable difference when this pattern appears. The first is present tense anchoring. When a co-parent revises a past agreement, bring the conversation immediately back to what needs to happen now. Not to avoid the conflict, but to refuse the invitation to manage the present from inside the past. What needs to happen now is, start there. Let that be your anchor. Answer the question, not the tone. The second is documentation before the dispute, not during it. Keep agreements in writing, not as leverage, but as structure. When a verbal agreement is made, follow up the same day with a brief written summary. Confirming what we discussed, Thursday, pickups starting this week. That message is not accusatory. It is structural, and it removes the opening for revision before it can appear. The third is response compression. The length of your response determines how much material exists to engage with. A short, clear message focused on logistics gives the revision pattern less room to work. Confirmed for Thursday at 3 p.m. is harder to dispute than a paragraph explaining the full history of why Thursday was agreed upon. Shorter responses prevent escalation by removing the friction points that longer messages create. The fourth is the cool-down window. When a message revises history in a way that triggers a strong reaction, do not respond immediately. Set a defined pause, whether that is 30 minutes or until the following morning. The purpose of this window is not delay. It is to ensure your response is grounded in the actual logistics rather than in the emotional pull of the revision itself. Responses sent from a calm state are shorter, clearer, and less likely to create a secondary conflict on top of the first one. None of these 4 shifts require the other parent to change their behavior. They are entirely within your control. And that is exactly where your communication strategy needs to live. Here is what all of this points back to. History revision as a pattern needs engagement to survive. It needs your attention, your defensiveness, and your investment in the past. When you stop feeding that cycle with lengthy corrections and emotional counter-arguments, the pattern loses its leverage. This does not mean accepting inaccurate framing without a record. It means understanding the difference between correcting the record inside a conversation and maintaining clear documentation outside of it. Documentation exists for situations where it carries real weight, such as formal proceedings or pattern tracking over time. In the day-to-day exchange, your energy produces more when it is anchored in the present than when it is spent defending the past. Structure reduces conflict, not because it removes disagreement, but because it removes the terrain where these patterns find their footing. The regulated parent is not the one who wins every argument about what was said. The regulated parent is the one who consistently keeps the conversation moving forward, focused on the child, documented in writing, and short enough to close cleanly. That consistency, over time, is what changes the dynamic. Not a single correct response, but a steady pattern of responses that refuse to be pulled backward. Your child does not need you to win the argument about October. They need the adults in their life to stay coordinated today. So here's the question I want you to sit with. The next time a co-parent revises a shared history in a conversation, what does your response look like? Does it pull you into the past, or does it stay grounded in what needs to happen now? There is no perfect response to every situation, but there is a direction: child-focused, present tense, documented, not debated. And that direction is available to you in every conversation, regardless of how the other person behaves. If this video helped you see something differently, consider the next video that's on the top left of your screen. The playlist in the bottom left covers some high-conflict co-parenting patterns, which is a 5-part series being updated over the next 3 weeks. And if this kind of content is helping you stay steady, subscribing on the right means you will not miss what comes next. You are doing the work. That is worth something.